Next Halloween, when the sun sets and someone is alone, he kills.
Hello, listeners past, present, and future. This is the Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park, where we take you moment by moment and frame by frame through the trailers that make us want to go to the movies. My name, as always, is Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francazio.
And today we are actually wrapping up Season 1 of the Trailer Park in terms of our coverage of the Halloween franchise trailers. Am I right?
Yes, there'll be one more final episode for this season.
Right.
But this is the end of the Halloween sort of road where we have...
We've now covered, basically, as of this episode, we will have covered every movie as of 2024.
We went through all the movies for our main series where we actually walk you through the entire film, every single film of the franchise. And now on the Trailer Park, we have also walked everyone through the trailers for the entire franchise. And, it's always bittersweet.
And while these episodes certainly delve into the kind of the history, legacy, and lore of the marketing of a lot of these movies we love, I also see these Halloween franchise trailer episodes during this first season of the Trailer Park also as sort of supplemental episodes to our original Season 1 Haddonfield Radio episodes.
Yep, it's like a to be continued.
Right. It's just also these episodes should also serve as a lot of extra information, maybe little avenues we didn't stroll down during the Haddonfield Radio episode. What I thought was kind of interesting is Haddonfield Radio Season 1, Episode 11 was our Halloween 2018 episode.
Look at that.
And Episode 11 of the Trailer Park, here we are again, full circle. Except for this episode of the Trailer Park, we're going to be doing kind of an special extended episode where we cover the trailers for Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and of course, Halloween Ends.
Yeah, when we're doing the main episodes where we are watching the movie and talking about them, sometimes to keep up with the movie as we talk, we kind of don't get to talk about everything we want to, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so this is a second chance for us, without sort of having that time thing to talk to, we are able to bring more information and specifically, like you said, more about the marketing and the influence the trailers have on an audience. And
well, if you followed along Season 1 of the Trailer Park, all the Halloween franchise episodes, the story of the marketing of a lot of these films within the Halloween franchise, within the slasher film era in general, that marketing is so fascinating and so interesting. And a lot of the trailers, the posters, and the ephemeral marketing materials for the Halloween movies, in my mind, are sometimes just as interesting as the behind the scenes of the films themselves.
I feel like almost every film in this franchise up to this David Gordon Green trilogy, their marketing and everything, stemming from the original all the way up to the end of the Rob Zombie films, really were products. All those trailers, all the marketing were really products of the evolution of the marketing for movies over a long period of time. And you see a lot of the different changes that happen over the decades through them. But now
there's a lot of connective tissue between the marketing materials for all of the Halloween films from 1978's Halloween up through the Rob Zombie era. Also, a lot of it is tied together because it was part of the ACAD sort of family business, and the way that they positioned these films in the pop cultural awareness, the way the ACADs sort of always had a guiding hand, whether it was Mustafa or of course his son Malik. The marketing, if you look at the trailers, for example, of all the Halloween films going all the way back to 1978, there's a kind of a similarity in how the films are sold. If you think about how like Halloween 4 is sold in the trailers, it's connecting back to Halloween 1 and 2. So therefore, it's connecting back. It has the same. It's connecting, continuing a story or a narrative. So the trailers themselves have kind of a similarity in what they're selling.
Yes. However, I think this trilogy in particular has an extra job that the others don't, where these trailers aren't so mind-blowing in the sense of what trailers were like in the these late 20.
Well, they know that they don't really have to get the fan base up to speed as to who Laurie Strode is, who Michael Myers is, what the mythology is. These trailers sort of rest on the principle that the vast majority of the projected audience for Halloween 2018, let's say, is this Halloween franchise fan base.
Yeah, but their main job is to sort of explain why their movie is going to work. I mean, the first trailer, each one of these trailers has a specific job to sort of make audiences understand where David Gordon Green's coming at from, because there have been so many Halloween movies before it, and so many times he's died. The
timelines have reset, obviously, all through the years and the decades, where you have these 4 narrative, multiversal timelines that Michael Myers and these characters exist within. Is that kind of what you're getting at here?
Yeah, I think their main job is, and they do it. When you watch the trailer for this first one, the 2018 Halloween, I mean, they pretty much give it to you that in the first opening voiceover that they are ignoring the events of all the sequels after part 1, and they really set you up to just know where you're going to be in this universe.
Yeah, it's like
there's no question. You don't have to sit there and be like, wait a minute, why is Laurie back, or why? How are they doing this, or how could this possibly be? Yeah,
this is bringing forth basically a brand new timeline into existence, which I guess you could call the 2018 timeline.
It's a new so what I'm getting at is over the decades, trailers have continually played a different role in the marketing of movies, and I think until we get to this one, now we have this new role for a trailer, which is to sort of let you know which multiverse you're in.
Right.
Okay.
Which becomes a very important distinction.
Yeah, it did keep happening. It's gonna keep happening, especially all the superhero movies, a lot of sci-fi stuff, a lot of franchises, basically, that filmmakers are gonna and studios are gonna want to keep exploring for a long time. That it's gonna become a new part of the marketing, and so I think these trailers are very well made and all that, but they're just solid. Stereotypical movie trailers and how they're presented.
That's exactly the word.
Because they don't want to overshadow the message that they need you to take home, which is just sort of listening to the voiceover and letting you know where you're at and why these characters are alive again and all that.
Well, there's another elephant in the room here in Halloween 2018, and that's Blumhouse.
Yeah.
And I think what these trailers are, especially the Halloween 2018 trailer, is I would make an argument that the Halloween 2018 trailer that we'll be watching in a little bit, it is such a distinctive, exact Blumhouse trailer.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, if you watch a lot of trailers for a lot of Blumhouse films, you will see this pattern that the Halloween 2018 trailer exhibits perfectly.
Yeah, I when I was rewatching it for this, I was kind of surprised at how much good stuff they give you in the trailer.
They give you a lot in the trailer,
and I think they know that they have to.
Right.
If this is going to be technically Halloween 11, right, in terms of all the movies that have come out, then. You know what I mean? Like, you have to give them some reasons why you want to go see Michael again.
Well, and in this case, you're seeing this older, hardened, kind of battle-hardened, trauma-hardened version of Laurie Strode as well. Yeah. And what, even from the very first trailer that we're going to watch, really is setting up is a promise that a lot of fans felt even, with the whole trilogy later wasn't never fulfilled, which was this unbelievable face-off that you were going to be excited for.
Yeah.
A final showdown between Laurie Strode and her brother, her nemesis, whatever you want to call him, Michael Myers.
Well, in a few minutes, when we start talking heavily about the third trailer, I definitely have a lot of thoughts regarding
because
that
certainly
as well.
there are a lot of fans out there of the Halloween franchise that felt that even by the conclusion of Halloween Ends, so by the conclusion of not just the David Gordon Green's Halloween 2018, but David Gordon Green and Company's Halloween trilogy, that fundamental face-off that was promised all the way back from this trailer was never really fully kind of gifted to the audience in the way that the audience seemed to want or desire.
Right, exactly.
Now, I've said before on Haddonfield Radio numerous times that I believe it was the writer Alan Moore who once said, a good storyteller gives an audience what they want. A great storyteller gives an audience what they need.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I would argue, and we'll get there when we talk more about Halloween Ends this episode, in the trailers and the marketing.
Yeah.
I would argue that I think fundamentally that promise was 100%, 1,000% fulfilled. I actually believe Halloween Ends fulfills the promise narratively of the entire franchise, and even generates new neural pathways of this incredible kind of wild, multiversal franchise going forward. And I just think a lot of fans just haven't been able to make peace with that yet. But much like Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, I think, like I said during the Halloween Ends episode of Haddonfield Radio, I do believe 20 years from now, people will look at Halloween Ends very differently.
Yeah.
Very differently.
Yeah.
But yes, all I'm bringing that up for, I'm not trying to jump the gun here on the episode. I'm bringing it up because fundamentally, the promise, the idea, the fundamental principle of this trilogy, the fuel that generated literally hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for this trilogy was this showdown between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it a little bit. The numbers for this trilogy, especially the first one,
It's fascinating.
I mean, it's mind-blowing. The money it made, obviously, out of the whole franchise, it's the one that's made the most. And
there's really no comparative example, even in horror franchise filmmaking, to my knowledge. And I'll be honest with you guys, I've literally studied movie box office going for decades. And I'm going to tell you, I can't think of one comparable example that, if you just look at Halloween 2018, an $80 million opening weekend.
it's crazy. It's crazy.
That
for
is
what
the
it is.
kind of an opening weekend that is reserved for superhero franchise filmmaking.
Exactly.
Star Wars, even.
Yeah.
I mean, you're up in the big leagues of 4-quadrant box office. Right?
And I will argue some of that is the legacy of Halloween and Michael Myers, but based on its incredible jump, and a lot of that I have to attribute to multiple viewings, people loving it so much that they go back. Like the filmmaking of the first one is so good.
Here's what I think it is.
The storytelling is so good.
Look, even with the giant built-in 4-decade fan base for the Halloween franchise and for horror, in general, that fan base that's going to show up on the opening weekend. I'm telling you, we know the size of the Halloween fan base, and that doesn't get you 80 million.
No, exactly.
For the opening weekend. What gets you to 80 million is that the marketing for the Halloween 2018 was so efficient and so successful that it actually exponentially grew the Halloween franchise fan base. This movie, Halloween 2018, brought in a substantial amount of new fans to the Michael Myers mythology. And to
That's
those
what I mean.
fans,
It's just
this
a good
film
movie.
is their their dawn,
Right.
is their beginning of
Right.
Michael
Exactly.
Myers journey.
Yep.
And what a great place for a new fan to start.
Yeah.
If
it really
Halloween
is
2018, let's say you're an 18-year-old, you were born in the year 2000, you're 18 years old in October of 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and on a Halloween weekend, you're going to go see Halloween 2018, even if you've never seen a previous Michael Myers film.
Mm-hmm.
If this is the film that's going to bite your ass and going to send you down the Michael Myers rabbit hole.
But even if you are a kid in that situation, guaranteed you know who Michael Myers is.
Oh, absolutely.
You have a preconceived notion, and you've seen imagery. and
Michael
then
Myers as the iconic idea of the American boogeyman that actually, I think, as a character, he extends, much like Freddy Krueger, for example. Michael Myers extends outside his reach extends outside of just his own franchise.
Right.
Michael Myers is truly a pop cultural iconic figure that you can say that name to someone who's never watched a horror film and they know who Michael Myers is.
Right.
I would guarantee.
Right. And I would say that especially James Dew Courtney's version or
Oh
David
my
Gordon
God.
Green's version is such a great version of Michael for a more modern audience to jump in. You know,
Absolutely.
if you've only got the what's in your head from pop culture without having really
Yes.
watched them, this version of him would live up to probably whatever was in
Absolutely.
some teenager's head. This is definitely a more aggressive Michael than we ever got. But
And what I
yet
find-
but it works. It
What I
fits
find
the character.
so also fascinating about Halloween 2018 in its marketing is here you have a film that your main protagonist is essentially elderly. Your main villain is essentially elderly.
Yeah.
And yet you are marketing this film to a teenage audience. And at no point from moment one of Halloween 2018's runtime till its conclusion do you ever feel anything less than the fiery energy of passionate people trying to create something that
Yeah.
will hold its place in an established legacy.
And that's another aspect you got to talk about is this movie obviously sets up a mold for other franchises to do a similar thing.
Yeah, I think even outside of horror, I think franchises, especially legacy franchises, even outside of horror, could really learn from what David Gordon Green, Jason Blum, and the Blumhouse executives and our artisans and all the people that worked on this trilogy, Danny McBride,
Yep.
Scott Teems, all these artists and writers and filmmakers.
Yeah.
It's really an amazing accomplishment because the Halloween 2018, say what you will about kills or ends, I would love for anyone to try to tell me that Halloween 2018 doesn't work like gangbusters on just about every conceivable level.
It's really, 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 really good. And so you got to wonder if it's even possible to keep to take that mold and get the same product, because they kind of asked David Gordon Green to do it again with The Exorcist, and I had no problems with what he did.
Right.
But obviously,
But pop culture apparently
people did.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately what he did with Halloween Ends,
I think
didn't-
soured The Exorcist for him in many ways.
well, and I think it also set up some critics and everyone else to kind of already be looking at him with a little bigger microscope. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because
It's just
because
really-
people take it personally, and a lot of people did not like what he did, the way he ended Halloween. Right? As much as he started this great, so. Can that approach always work? I don't know,
Look.
but they did do something pretty magical here that it's probably gonna over time turn into a sort of format
To me,
in filmmaking.
The David Gordon Green and Company Halloween trilogy, and I've said this before on these Haddonfield Radio airwaves, to my mind, it is the perfect ending for the franchise from 1978 8 until 2023. I believe whatever's going to come next for the Halloween franchise, whether it's a streaming series, a TV series, more movies down the line, well, that will be the beginning of its almost like its second act, its second legacy.
It's modern.
I feel like Halloween ends for good or for bad was the ending of the original Halloween franchise legacy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unless they're going to do more with Jamie Lee Curtis or something. Yeah.
Which
I mean,
would be, to my mind, a tremendous mistake.
Right. Of course. So, you know.
And yet they've done it. And I wouldn't be surprised.
No.
It would not even remotely surprise me.
As long as they don't do anything major. She can have a photo on a wall or a...
I don't know. I think we've got to move past it.
I know.
Let's leave everything in the past.
But we
bring
say
Michael
that.
Myers to a new story universe.
We always say, you know, leave it alone but clearly, at least with this franchise, when they really go off the path,
right,
it doesn't work for them, you know?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? People want Michael Myers, and they don't want it to feel so different than the 78 Michael.
But you were just making a really good point about how a lot of the audiences coming into Halloween 2018, back in October of 2018, when it was released and exhibited theatrically around the world, a lot of these audiences, a lot of the people coming probably had not seen previous films. But like you said, they were aware of the iconography, the pop cultural iconography of Michael Myers. What was important is what Michael Myers means. So you can extract Michael Myers as a character, and I would say you take him out and place him in a brand new storytelling universe.
Exactly. I am curious. That brings up a really good question. I would be curious to talk to fans, and maybe we have some out there. If you were a fan that didn't start liking Halloween till the David Gordon Green trilogy, did Halloween Ends bug you as much as the fans who have been tied into it since the beginning?
I would almost be willing to bet, and you can never generalize an answer, but I would bet a lot of people what you're suggesting would be accurate.
Because they haven't sat through 11 other films or whatever it is, and so...
And a lot of what Joe and I is talking about here is very obviously multi-levels of speculation and pure hypothetical.
I'd be curious, because that thing that everyone complained about in Ends, the lack of Michael, would you feel there was a lack of Michael if your only world of Halloween was these
films?
Was just these three, this trilogy?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would be willing to think there was a lot of young, impressionable horror fans that went and saw Halloween 2018 and fell in love with it, and then went and watched the 78.
Right. Yeah, I wonder about that too.
Listen, when I was 18, when would we have been 18? What year would we have been 18? So
93, 4.
Somewhere right around there.
Yeah.
Okay. So a movie from 30 years before, for us, we would need a reason to seek it out.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not, you can't just assume that.
Although it's a classic.
It is a classic.
It's shown, it's, you know,
it could go either way.
It's tied to a holiday.
All I'm trying to generally suggest is I would imagine a lot of that Halloween 2018 created a lot of new Halloween fans.
Yes.
That's all I'm trying to suggest.
And if you are one of these fans, like I said, that started with this trilogy, please, and you don't mind me asking questions, put a message down there, because I would be curious to ask you a few questions about your thoughts, you know, on this trilogy based on not being tied to the older ones like we are.
It's another interesting rabbit hole in the Halloween franchise legacy is this huge epic dark period that essentially exists from the point where Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 comes out in 2009. You basically have a 9-year gap before another Halloween project comes to the screen, which is obviously this, Halloween 2018. And the development period between 2010 and 2018 is so convoluted And the amount
Oh,
of
God.
incredible names
Yeah.
from the horror community. I'm going to just throw some of the names between 2010 and 2018. These are all writers and filmmakers that worked on treatments,
Right.
trying to continue the franchise. Patrick Lussier, who we just talked
Yep.
about on Haddonfield Radio, because he was
Screen Ties.
sort of worked alongside Wes Craven.
Yep.
Him and his partner Todd Farmer had around 2010 had developed stuff. Let's see. Let's just throw some of these names in here. Let's see. I have them all in here. Let's see. Brian Collins and Lee Piotrowski, who ended up creating the but the continuation of Hellraiser in 2022.
Okay, yeah.
They had done some work. Let's see. Mike Flanagan at one point, who has created a lot of great Netflix horror series, made one of my favorite films of all time, horror films of all time, Oculus. He was developing, that was going to be called Halloween 2017. 24. There was going to be a Halloween 3D that was going to be made. That was going to be in the vein of Paranormal Activity.
I mean, a Rob Zombie H3 was pretty close a few times.
Yep, they say that. Yeah, a couple times. There was guys Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan who created The Collector and The Collection, that kind of slasher, kind of neo-slasher duology. They came in and they tried to develop something that had to do with Michael Myers on death row.
Right.
And he's broken out of death row. And it goes on and on and on. Even Adam Wingard. Adam Wingard, who directed The Guest, which is a great film. He was one of the guys who created the VHS franchise, and he's created and directed the last two Godzilla and Kong films. Great director. He almost stepped in right before David Gordon Green and his team came on board. And he even got John Carpenter's approval to direct a film. So all I'm trying to say is that period of time, almost a decade of development, is a fascinating period.
Yeah.
If you want to dig into that as a fan and just look at all the different projects that almost came to fruition in the Halloween timelines, it's really, really interesting stuff.
And then
that jumps through all the different timelines, the story ideas.
And ultimately, it all just falls into place once the rights get switched over
to Blumhouse.
To Blumhouse.
And then Jason Blum is famously able to coax John Carpenter into essentially a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like a sort of passive producer position.
Yeah, kind of saying, we've talked about it, where Carpenter would always be criticized. And it's like, okay, well, here's your chance now.
Instead of criticizing, why don't you come in and
put
help?
it in on something and make it...
Get it on the right track.
Exactly, what you think would be good.
And once that happened, the perfect storm came together, and David Gordon Green, of course, Danny McBride, and others came together and started developing Halloween 2018.
And so that also kind of ties back to that idea of... taking a franchise and restarting it in the same way these guys did, and maybe in what they did with The Exorcist. And I always talk about that, the magic, the certain combination of people, and I do wonder if, this works so well because, when given the chance, David Gordon Green, this is what he was already working on. This is what he had love for. This is what him and Danny McBride had conversations. That's why he knew to write with him on this. It's that passion project for him. It's that thing that his first chance at to be able to do this. And you know what I mean? It wasn't somebody had to be hired to come in and work with Carpenter and Blumhouse, and it was like, this guy...
I want to just quickly say, I can tell you a personal little interesting side note.
Yeah.
Almost like a little personal connection fun fact in here.
Right.
To Danny McBride.
Yeah.
As Joe knows, for a while I worked with this comic book artist and storyboard artist, and that storyboards a lot of movies, named Jason Mayo.
Yep.
And we did a paranormal TV series together for PBS. And while we were working together, Jay was also working during storyboards for a lot of major movies.
Yes.
And he knew all sorts of people that worked on movies. And through his connections, he found out that Danny McBride and one of his partners, they wanted to try to come up with a brand new slasher idea. And so he, through some other channels, knew that Jay was a big horror fan and said, do you want to try to come up with a pitch?
Yeah.
So Jay came to me, and Jay and I created this pitch for this idea called Survivor Girl. And Jay even made a little comic book for the pitch. Nothing came of it, of course. But interestingly enough, 5 years later, Danny McBride is working on the premiere slasher film idea of the reboot of Halloween.
It was surprising
he must have really
hearing
got
his name.
way. Apparently, he's a huge horror fan.
I didn't know that until his name was attached to this, and I remember even thinking like, wait, is it the same Danny McBride?
Yeah, he's a legit, like not just a horror fan, but a legit like movie fan.
Yeah, no,
with a deep film knowledge.
Yeah.
And he's a really tremendous writer. And even when you look at Danny McBride's comedy as an actor in some of his movies and shows like Eastbound and Down or Foot Fist Way, there's a real darkness in his comedy.
Yeah.
The root of Danny McBride's humor really lies in darkness. So a lot of that is I see it. I see why he would work with this. And I think a lot of the writing in Halloween 2018 is really, really exceptional.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the development and the family dynamics of the Strode family, as you could call them.
And just a beautiful blending of all the right amount of details from the past movies.
Right.
Or movie.
And how about... Another cool fun fact is when David Gordon Green, Danny McBride, and their writing partners were developing Halloween 2018, one of their first inclinations was the idea of bringing Jamie Lloyd and Laurie Strode together in a timeline where she officially was her daughter, and they even wanted Danielle Harris to reprise her role. And for a lot of obviously convoluted reasons, that sadly did not come to fruition. And that character, if you look at how Karen is portrayed in Halloween 2018 and in the trilogy, that's basically what Danielle Harris would have been doing.
Not really quite sure who the father is. It's implied that maybe it's the cop.
They just wanted to give Jamie Lloyd and Laurie Strode a timeline where they could actually exist together and have a catharsis together as characters. That sort of brought peace to both of those characters together.
Sure.
And boy, would that have been cathartic for the audience.
You have to ask yourself then, what is the priority in this movie? Are we trying to
Is it too much fan service? Doesn't that go to your heart?
Oh, it's great, but I think ultimately they probably thought the story more focused on Laurie for what they're trying to do. It would achieve their objective more.
And another interesting thing...
It's a more pointed story.
If you want to dig a little deeper into that little notion, Danielle Harris, through her podcast and just being an outspoken person, she's actually spoken at length about the development process of the Blumhouse Halloween trilogy and her tangential connection to it and her regret that and she states that it has nothing to do with anything financial or economical or make a business wise. As part of the Halloween franchise family, she wanted to re-enter the story narrative, the narrative river, and bring her character into a more peaceful resolution. I don't know. To me, yes, I agree with you. Devil's Advocate, it's probably too far afield in terms of fan service. And it also starts mingling these timelines together.
It gets a little. If you're trying to strictly go off the first one, and you only want people to have to know that.
Well, what
instead
elements
of that, and then part 4 as well.
And it's like at that point, if you bring Jamie Lloyd, you say, well, now I have to have the elements of even part 5 in there.
But then it also makes you have to stick to Michael and Laurie being brother and sister.
That's exactly right.
And that's obviously, I think, a very
even though
bold thing to choice.
Wait. I think he could have reconnoitered it within this timeline.
But I think if you start putting too many rules on your multiverse, it'll get way too confusing.
You're right.
If you can say you got to just skip everything past 1, but you can't say, skip 1 and then jump to 4, and then you can have this, it gets a little weird.
Okay, but let me just throw one last thought at it.
Yeah.
One last little piece of, one last kindling into this fire. If you think about how this Laurie Strode in Halloween 2018 is not the same Laurie Strode from, let's say, Halloween Resurrection.
Right.
It's still Jamie Lee Curtis playing both incarnations, but they're Laurie Strode existing in 2 different realities.
All right, I see what you're saying.
So you could have brought
just a
different a different multiversal version of Jamie Lloyd.
I see what you're saying. That's not tied to Halloween 4.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
The Jamie Lloyd that would have been born to Laurie Strode at that
From
point in the
part
timeline
one,
that we just don't see anywhere in this
I see
story,
what you're saying.
in this timeline. Am I being clear?
I see what you're saying, but you could see how it could confuse people because
So you would
did
only
exist in
have
4 and 5.
You would have only had to have used the elements of the Jamie Lloyd previous version of the character. You could have kind of cherry-picked that.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel sad because I do wish we could have seen Danielle Harris back again, and I would have loved to see the dynamic. And I find it endlessly interesting now that I know that little fun fact, that when I watch these movies now and I see the character of Karen and I think, wow, that's interesting, that could have been how they would have used the Jamie Lloyd character.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Now, you have to bring up that probably a huge part of the success of the trailer, the marketing, and then eventually people seeing the movie is the wonderful work by Christopher Nelson, who has between him and David Gordon Green, they have the brains to say we are just going to give people the Michael mask that they remember, that they loved from '78. Obviously, there's small changes. Obviously, it's aged.
Well, each artist has to bring their own signature to the work.
But it's still that mask. You know what I mean? It's something that none of the other sequels were ever.
They paid tremendous respect to the original masks.
Yeah. So when you're seeing this trailer, when you see the mask, I mean, they know what they're doing. They're setting you up for this multiverse in the trailer. They make sure you understand that the mask is the mask. You see him put it on. You see the the reporter bring it to him. So they're saying right away, we know this is important. And look, it's the mask. We're giving it to you guys. It has to be, a big part of the success of this movie.
This film creates an almost immediate power around the mask right from the jump.
Right.
In the way now I would argue iconic opening sequence of Halloween 2018. Right. The power that exists in the mask when the podcaster has his hand down in the bag and he's about to draw it out. And it's something of this cognitive dissonance between the mask that's about to be revealed and that we're also getting this kind of peer into an unmasked older Michael as played by James Jude Courtney that creates this power in what you're, as an audience member and you're watching. It's like a power is created on screen.
Beautiful writing. It's
brilliant.
To throw the audience right away into this, I don't know. I don't want to say magical. It's just like...
That is the correct word.
It's this magical idea. Yeah, if you're a fan of these movies and Michael and the whole thing, and you're at the same time where we're back, we're getting him, he's unmasked, you've always been curious.
I mean, we all know as fans...
What's he like under there? And we're getting the mask at the same time.
As horror fans, that mask has an almost spiritual importance to the die-hard horror fan, as we all know.
Yeah.
And the way David Gordon Green and the writers of the film portray the revelation of the mask the first time out of the bag, and it's the fact that the podcaster's hand goes down into the bag and holds his hand in the bag like it's generating its power. And you see this subtle recognition, almost a subconscious recognition in Michael Myers that even though he does not know what's in the bag, it's creating the impression that the mask has a subconscious power.
Exactly. I don't think that Michael's evil stems from the mask, but the mask's evil plus Michael's evil
creates a magical, almost supernatural presence.
Voltron has been completed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is specifically what David Gordon Green, in his directing and writing, that's what he is explicitly stating at that opening scene. And is that the iconography, the iconic nature of that mask, as from the fandom's perspective in through the narrative reality of it, has taken on such power that he actually, literally, narratively addresses that power and gives it more power, and it's brilliant.
And he kind of brings it full circle back in Halloween Ends.
Yes,
with this idea that with Corey, it's the sort of same thing. The mask plus his evil
And
turns
like the
Corey
subtle
into the killer.
physical
That,
kind
you know.
of dissolution of the mask over the 3 movies, the
Right.
destruction of the mask.
Right. But it doesn't matter how destroyed.
Doesn't matter.
It's the mask is the mask. It holds some sort of.
I just really love that David Gordon Green and his writing team understood that truth, that you used the word magical, and I think that is a perfectly reasonable word. There is a supernatural, almost like a for my lack of a better word, there is some sort of esoteric power connected to that mask. And in a meta way, David Gordon Green is talking about our fandom connection
I was
to
saying, in this-
that iconography.
In the same way Michael feels
way
that
that
we feel it.
As the scene's playing out on screen, and you're on that opening night of Halloween 2018 in the theater, and you don't know what to expect. So that scene's playing for the first time for audiences. You know that that's having an effect on the audience. They're just getting just as riled up as Michael is.
Yeah.
It's just magical. It's brilliant filmmaking. I don't care what anybody says. It's brilliant filmmaking. If the whole trilogy had kept that intensity and that frequency of filmmaking, I think the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy would be what I feel it is, just on a wider scale, which is one of the greatest works of horror.
Yeah.
But anyway,
let's watch we're gonna watch
there's
the
more to
trailer
talk about.
for all 3, but we're gonna watch one, talk about it, watch another, talk about it.
yeah, settle
So-
in. We're taking our time. We're going through each one of these. It's really our last time we're going to be talking about these 3 films for a while.
For a while, yeah.
So we're going to just take our time and we're just kind of maybe some of this sounds like we're just babbling, but maybe that's what we want to do here. So, but before we jump in the trailer, I just want to say really quickly, if you are sitting wherever you are in the world, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it in an earbud on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this, however you're listening to this, we just want you to know how much that means to us and how much we sincerely appreciate you. If you are taking time out of your busy life to support our creativity here at Haddonfield Radio, if you're a fan of these movies and you're enjoying what we're presenting creatively here, we just want to always take a moment every episode to sincerely say thank you and express to you how much that means to us. Your comments your comments on the Instagram page or on the YouTube channel or on the Spotify page. We really, really appreciate you, your support, your continued support, and Joe and I both. It really means the world to us that you're here listening with us and that you're enjoying these trailers with us. And I just wanted to say on behalf of Joe and myself, from the bottom of our hearts, just like we always say, and we always mean it, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it, especially as we're coming towards the end of this first season of Trailer Park. You know,
I've loved this season of Trailer Park. I've enjoyed doing these episodes. And Joe and I, when we started the Trailer Park series, we were both sort of shocked because we wanted to kind of dig in and research other kind of trailer breakdowns. And you can find trailer breakdowns, but they're always like Easter egg breakdowns. It's not really about
just what people notice.
Yeah, it's not really about like how the trailers were made or the history of the trailers. You can't really find much of that. So I don't know how successful we were over these 11 episodes so far, but that was our goal, to try to shed some light on this incredibly fascinating process of how these films are marketed and how these films are sold to the fans that end up loving them.
The big idea, like, are these trailers effective? After, like we always say to each other after we watch one, would you go see this movie after this trailer? And so, you know, for some of these things, it was easier to find information than others because it is weird how little is written about trailers. But
and how trailers and marketing has changed over the decades is also very interesting. And so this journey has been really informative, and I've learned a lot. And I think that for me is successful.
Yep.
And I've picked up a lot of information from you guys as well along the way, and certainly from people like Keith Voss, who's joined us for 2 of these episodes. If you guys want to listen to conversations with a real practical trailer expert who has worked in the trenches of trailer filmmaking for real, serious, iconic films, then if you go back and listen to our our Psycho franchise episode called Haddonfield Radio Goes Psycho. He's one of our he appears on that episode,
Yep.
and one of the previous Halloween episodes as well.
Yeah, he worked on some of the mid.
I think it was H2O and Resurrection.
Yeah, the mid Halloween movies. So some really
Fascinating
good
person,
stuff.
and a really nice person too.
Yeah. And so, you know, and as we get ready to watch this first trailer, you know, for this 2018 movie, it's interesting to point out that trailers really start to change here in the modern world with the internet. That they are starting to premiere on YouTube, or now it's not always about seeing something in the theater for the first time, right?
And in a more immediate sense, in a relative Halloween or just 2018 sense, things were really about to change.
Yeah, I would say
not just for the Halloween franchise,
exactly.
but for everyone on Earth.
After this movie, we're going to get into
and certainly the way the next two films were sold.
Exactly. So let's watch this first one. I think it's interesting to point out that there was no what you would call a stereotypical teaser for this movie. There is like an official trailer, and then there's a what they call the final trailer, and they're both like 2.5 minutes. But they both take different approaches, but we're watching sort of the first one that was unleashed on the world.
This is what you would probably remember as that iconic main Halloween 2018 trailer.
Yeah.
That really, you're going to see what we were talking about a little bit ago. This is I think it's literally... Okay, let me just say this. There's a film, Harrison Ford made it, Peter Weir directed it, called Witness.
Yeah.
You know this movie,
Great
Witness?
movie, yeah.
Well, a lot of kind of like people who study film claim that it is literally a perfect film. Its structure is narratively perfect. Well, I would argue that the Halloween 2018 trailer you're about to see is just about as perfect a trailer in my mind as you can make.
Yeah. It gets you excited, but it's doing its main job, which is to sort of put the audience at ease for, you know, this new multiverse,
right?
And how it's going to be okay that we're just
the way
that it's going to work again.
You'll see how it sets up 40 years of storytelling, essentially, and iconography, and it gives you the goods. Like Joe was saying before, it gives you a lot, but yet when you think about through the prism of looking at it, the whole film, it doesn't feel like it gives you anything.
Well, no, you don't know how it's all connected.
Yeah,
You're just getting some,
you don't
some
get the
great
context.
imagery, but you don't understand the context.
But the imagery is
And
perfectly chosen.
Thank God they have Carpenter back and his son to work on the music.
I mean, having
so that you get
Carpenter-
that Carpenter music and themes, and it's him. You know,
and I think it was his name, Daniel Davies.
Yep.
What's John Carpenter's son's name?
Cody.
Cody Carpenter, John Carpenter. So in many ways, when they came aboard to do the music for the 3 David Gordon Green and Co. films, it was almost like Carpenter was building himself in again to the DNA of the franchise.
It's like
the
just
soul, really, of the franchise.
It's just getting one more original cast member back. That music is just as important as any character in the
not
original
just
movie.
the music, but the music as played, composed, conducted, controlled by essentially John Carpenter.
It's not just somebody else who is deciding to bring these themes
using
back.
the motifs.
No. This guy
is John Carpenter himself guiding it into the story structure of the films.
And at least he's open enough to also have the input of the younger guys with him, so that there is, as much as I love the Carpenter themes that are back here, what I love in the music in this first one is some of those really low, modern sounds that come up when Michael's killing, those real big
It's really interesting because if I didn't,
it's so
let's
good.
say I hadn't known that the score was by John Carpenter, Cody Carpenter, and Daniel Davies, there are many musical sequences from 2018 Kills and Ends that to me almost, I would have said, is this Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross? Like it almost sounds like their music. Like it's so modern and industrial and electronic, and yet, like you just said, it weaves absolutely perfectly into the classic motifs that John Carpenter has perfected
family,
for half a century.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's take a look at the trailer.
We're going to watch the trailer
for
and then
Halloween
we'll come back.
2018, David Gordon Green's film, and we'll be right back.
I've waited for him.
Testing 1, 2, 3. We're on.
We're here to investigate a patient that killed 3 innocent teenagers on a Halloween in 1978. He was shot by his own psychiatrist and taken into custody that night, and has spent the last 40 years in captivity. Hello, Michael. I have something you might like to see.
Everyone in my family turns into a nutcase this time of year. Yeah, I mean, your grandmother is Laurie Strode. She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
No, it was not her brother. That's something that people made up.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape?
What the hell did you do that for?
So I can kill him.
Dad, look out!
The bus crashed.
Mom, what bus crashed?
Michael escaped.
Excuse me, somebody's in here.
Hello?
He's waited for this night. He's waited for me. I've waited for him.
Get out! Go home! Get inside!
You don't believe in the boogeyman?
He's here!
Michael! You should.
Can you close the closet door?
All right, and we are back from watching the trailer for 2018's Halloween.
Wow, that trailer.
Good stuff.
You know, it's funny though. I will say this about it. If I was going to put on my constructive criticism hat,
Okay.
I would say this. It does feel a little overproduced. Like it feels a little like show-stoppy to me. You know what I mean? I don't know. I know that's not a word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but
like too much like flash, bling, blang. And I know you have to tell a quick amount of. You got to get as much as you can in 90 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
But I tend to like the trailers that are more cinematic and almost feel like a little sort of their own little tiny of like film.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, like we've established through this series, we've found out many times that the filmmakers themselves are not the ones putting these trailers together, and it falls on the shoulders of the distribution company. In this case, probably Universal Pictures, or I don't know if it would go to Blumhouse or whoever, you know, designates it from their end. But it would be interesting to see what would happen if you let, you know, David Gordon Green cut his own trailer. Or you know what I mean?
guarantee you that it would have been a far different trailer.
Sure.
And I'm sure you can, I can, every fan of this franchise listening to this right now could do this, but I could certainly think of ways you could market Halloween 2018 without using any footage from the film. There's plenty of ways you could have built a trailer that didn't give you anything from the film, but told you everything you needed to know to get you excited to go to see the movie. That's not obviously the direction they chose to go.
I mean, it worked. You can't nitpick it too much with the numbers.
When I was criticizing it, I was doing that as a devil's advocate.
Yeah, of course. Yes, no.
I think
it is
the
definitely
trailer,
a modern trailer with the modern take on how it was cut, and
it's very Blumhouse.
As we were just watching it, and obviously I've seen the movie a ton, and I watched the trailer leading up to this a bunch, but I still sitting here when we watched it, and some of those shots of Michael, I was still like to myself going like, oh, whoa, because it's still awesome. in the way it is presented in the trailer. You know, the way they build up to him putting on that mask and everything.
There's something about that checkerboard floor that just works on my psyche, like gangbusters.
Yeah.
I don't, and it's interesting because I think if you were to just quickly think of a checkerboard floor, of course you'd picture black and white.
Yeah.
But they go with this kind of oblique, orangey, earthy tone in white, if I remember correctly, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a real place. I can't think of it right now.
That floor is a real
That whole
place?
building
That's
that
not a
they're in.
constructed set?
No, yeah.
That's
That's I think why they went
but
there.
like a real place in the context of it being an actual institution.
I want to say it's like a military
Wow.
something or other. I can't remember from my original research, but that was it's just one of those locations. They go location scouting and they found this place to go shoot in.
Well, to me, it also sort of intuits the idea of like a chessboard, right?
Yeah.
And you think in terms of the story in Halloween 2018. I'm blanking on his name. Dr. Sartain.
Yes.
He's playing kind of like 4D chess within the narrative of Halloween 2018. He's positioning these two
He's moving Michael.
diametrically opposed characters together against each other, at least in the first film.
Yeah.
And what's really neat, if you guys want to really delve into something really, really cool, Joe can attest to this, the novelizations for the 3 David Gordon Green films are actually really, really well written and really interesting.
You get a lot more of Michael in the hospital.
A lot more of his relationship with Dr. Sartain.
Which is weird. So, Ray, you want to say, did Dr. Sartain also orchestrate somehow the reporters coming? Because think about the amazing coincidence that when he, Michael's being moved and all this is going on with Sartain, that these guys would show up with the mask, So,
well, a lot of people, certainly on Reddit, in a lot of Reddit posts surrounding the Halloween 2018 trilogy, dispute and talk about and argue the whole idea of how he would have gotten the podcaster would have gotten his hand on that mask.
Yeah, I had to let go of that right away.
He lightly mentions like somebody's in a friend
DA's
in the
office
district
owed
attorney's
me a
office.
favor.
But owing you a favor is one thing.
and
giving you what would at that point, if you think of the in-universe reality of the Halloween movies, okay? The events of Michael Myers' crimes would be looked at in the same way we look at a lot of extremely famous true crime.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that mask within the spectrum of their reality would be like having John Wayne Gacy's clown costume
I know.
and giving it to your podcaster friend.
I have to imagine some cool story where they go to the DA's office and somehow end up tricking him and they're basically stealing the mask because they know they need it as some last-ditch attempt to get this interview.
But before I lose my train of thought again, and why I brought that up, is to your memory, because I can't remember offhand, anywhere in that 2018 novelization, do they go into any more detail about how the podcaster got his hands on that mask?
Not that's jumping out right away in my head.
Because I find it interesting that it was a thorn that stuck in your brain too.
No, when I watched the movie, I definitely originally was just kind of like, wait a minute, who would let that just go?
It was the one element of that opening sequence of Halloween 2018 that we were just talking about how revelatory it is. It was maybe one of the only details in that scene, in that sequence, continuum of scenes, that
you truly have to suspend disbelief.
To stick out in my mind as a detail that my brain naturally wants more information about.
It does. That'd probably be one flaw in their writing. I bet for some reason they thought that simple line would be enough.
And for maybe 90% of viewers, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
But I think we can't be the only two deep dive fans that
I mean, I don't know the justice system well, but it sticks out as something that shouldn't be as easy as he made it to be.
But let me just I'll put the pin in it. I'll put the pin on this point for now, and we'll move on by just saying this. The Halloween franchise, as all fans know, we've covered it, what I'm about to talk about, on one of our live streams. Joe covered it specifically. Has a very storied and colorful history in terms of how comic books have told a lot of the kind of side stories of the Halloween franchise that the films just simply don't have time to address, like the Charlie Bowles story.
Yep.
You can find that in some of those original old Halloween comics.
Yeah.
Well, boy, howdy, wouldn't that story of how these podcasters got invested in the story of Laurie Strode and Michael Myers, and how they got invested and got involved and got access and got that mask. What a perfect place that could be sort of canonized within a comic.
I do remember there's a lot more told about those podcasters and their relationship to each other.
Yes, that I do remember in the novelization.
There was this whole weird scene in the hotel room where he actually puts on the mask and gets in the shower with her naked, like, with the mask on.
See,
and
these are the type of details why the novelizations are so worth checking out.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, I know I'm a nerd with a lot of things, but, like, whenever I really love, and it's only really with genre films where you'll find the ability to do this, but whenever I see like a sci-fi movie, I really am like, it really captures my imagination. Like, for example, The Creator came out last year. I just thought the world building was great, so I went out and I got the novelization, right? I still buy novelizations for a lot. Like the last two Godzilla movies, I've bought the novelizations, simply because I love learning all those geeky extra details.
Yeah, ever since I was a kid, the novels of movies were always fun to read.
It used to be, getting the soundtrack and the novel was like the two things I would immediately do when I was a kid.
Total tangent, but related to the subject. When I was a kid, Back to the Future came out, and the novel has a really crazy thing at the end that's not in the movie, where basically all the events of the movie happen, and at the very end it's revealed that the whole time Doc did have a hidden piece of the fuel, the
plutonium or uranium
in the DeLorean the whole time, but Marty never knew it because the Doc had got shot before he left, and so it wasn't.
God.
And it was this kind of like womp 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 thing, and I thought in my head it was always mind blowing to me as a kid that like. There was also like I didn't understand though, like why would it be so different in the movie, but it was cool.
Going along that with the Back to the Future example you just brought up,
yeah.
I would argue that if it's in the official novelization, well, that official novelization, a lot of these details are usually culled from the novelization is being written before the film's even made. Usually, the novelist is writing from the screenplay, and God knows what various draft they're working from.
Sure.
And so details end up, and sometimes the rights holders decide to leave those details in the novelization just to enrich the story for those who want to seek them out.
Or they're just, I think a lot of times they're just produced way before the movie, they're actually physically printed and it's just too late.
Insofar as that Back to the Future reference with either the uranium, plutonium, whatever it was, the radioactive material, I would argue that is canon. Because it exists.
It probably was in a version of the script at some point.
And so whatever details exist in in those Halloween novelizations, and we all know as fans of this franchise, going all the way back to the beginning, if you want to know how important the novelizations are to the, even the early days of the Halloween franchise, go on eBay and try to buy one.
Oh God!
They're hundreds of dollars to buy
the Richard Curtis
existing
novels.
copies.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So what I'm trying to say is,
I've always wanted one. It's on my dream list.
Yeah, and it's in there. So there is a history in the Halloween franchise where a lot of the novelizations have contained all these extra details. And I really want to know more about how they procured that mask from the district attorney's office, what the exact detail was. I wish somebody would come to us and say, go ahead and you guys can write that. Because
somebody, for all I know, there is already a book or a comic book graphic novel, or maybe it was in the novel and we don't remember it. But
could be.
Anyway,
if anyone wants us to, we will gladly pitch that.
So was this trailer effective?
I love that. I always ask you, but I love that you're asking me this time. And I'm going to say, my ass, as it was, would be there opening night. Halloween 2018 is the only film of the David Gordon Green trilogy that I saw in the movie theater.
Yeah, it definitely brought me back around after... initially I was pretty not into the Rob Zombie movies.
Right.
And, I watched them, but I was just kind of like, oh, is this what they're doing with it? And then I see the trailer for this, and I'm like, oh my God, there's the mask. We got Laurie. They're bringing it back, and I got very excited for it, and I loved it like right off the bat.
And like we were talking about how the 2018 launched a lot of new fans for this franchise. Like you're just saying, and certainly with me too, it reignited a lot of fans' love for these films.
Well, you wondered if it was ever going to be able to be pulled back on track, again, in a with movies that were done and made really well, or
like in terms of how
considered crap.
Right,
you know what I mean? Basically,
like you weren't sure what you were going to get ultimately.
So the last couple, with the main timeline there that they did, and then you get the Rob Zombie ones. They just kind of fell flat,
right?
And you wondered, you know what I mean? Is this? I just don't think it's. I think it's dead. But then David Gordon Green does this, and you go, well, okay.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, it was the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy that actually inspired Joe and I to create Haddonfield Radio.
Yeah, it's definitely the buzz that was, created.
That was the fuel that really said, let's do this.
I mean, Halloween picking back up in terms of its social and
just getting
and
back out
culture.
to the awareness of people, into the ethos, really.
The whole thing that happened that stemmed from this trilogy, it definitely got me reinvested in the whole franchise, not just his trilogy, but everything.
Real quick, as if you've been following Haddonfield Radio or Trailer Park episodes, Joe is a huge, deep Star Wars fan, and I wanted to just quickly make one last quick point, going back to 2018, Halloween 2018. The film that it most, I feel, reminds me of is Force Awakens.
Oh, sure.
In not in its subject matter, of course, but in the way it's treated as a legacy sequel.
Yeah.
Or almost like a baton handoff.
It's sort of, it's definitely like that, but without the multiverse aspect.
Absolutely right.
But in terms of them sort of copying an
and I only mean that
footprint,
gently, that point.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean...
the style of sequel, like legacy sequel filmmaking that you see in something like Star Wars Force Awakens, there's a lot of the same DNA in Halloween 2018.
Yeah, David Gordon Green obviously puts a lot of himself into this and did a lot, but this first movie had to sort of follow the footprint of the original for its success.
Okay, well, here's the argument I would make. David Gordon Green and his team consciously, and this is just I'm just creating this idea.
Yeah.
They consciously realized that with Halloween 2018, the best thing they can do is what we've been talking about en masse here. Energize the base and grow new fans. And how you do that is really not by shaking the tree too vigorously, okay?
Yeah.
But then you get to Halloween Kills, and you do see a dramatic, stylistic change.
Well, you got to remember, though, that when they were making 2018 Halloween, he had no guarantee at all of sequels. So he had to make 2018 with the idea that this might be it.
Right.
Right? So that's why you get that sort of ending that Michael may have... they may have actually killed Michael off in that fire. I mean, it's the old typical horror movie. You don't see him die, but how did he ever get out? And they could leave it at that, and that could have been the end of Michael. And Laurie gets redeemed, and you know what I mean?
Halloween Kills could have made a serviceable ending.
As much as it's the beginning of an arc of a trilogy, it's also a beginning, middle, and end of itself. It works as its own piece. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And he had to do that.
Yep.
So he had to sort of really pull a lot from that 78 movie. I think it was just a thing they knew that, or they wanted to do because they knew it would be successful.
Well, look.
There's so many similarities. There's so many visual references.
Well,
there's so many stories
of pulling from the 78, right?
Yeah.
We talk about how effective the opening of Halloween 2018 is. How can you not talk about the opening of Halloween Kills?
Right.
The Halloween 1978 flashback. That I would suggest, if you were to just look at that opening sequence almost as like a very expensive fan film.
Yeah.
It is spectacular.
Oh, I love it. And I know some people are kind of like a sacrilege to go and try and insert yourself back into the Carpenter film, but I love it. I love it because they did it well. You know what I mean?
And
you
Aaron-
could have not done that well,
And
but they
Aaron
did it well.
Armstrong portrays the 78 flashback version of Michael.
Yep.
And just like James Jude Courtney, he brings something real
Yeah,
to
it's
it
that
that's so
just-
dynamic and is so exactly 1978 to my eye.
Yeah, he's moving.
And for my
yeah.
taste.
Well, James Jude Courtney isn't a young man,
Right.
And that works for playing the older Michael, and so all his movements are that of an older man. And then, in that flashback, they have the young man in the suit and knows fast, quick, bolting out of a door and pushing the cop up against the wall type of thing. It's right on. It's great.
And I like
the
how
mask,
they
house.
they use the flashback to reinforce the Hawkins character from the
Right.
first film. Even though what you think you may have seen him dead,
Yeah.
but from the beginning of Kills pre-flashback
Yeah.
that he is still gurgling and somewhat alive. And I like that you go back and you see this connection to his, when he was like the rookie cop and his
He had a
original
chance to
during
kill
the
him,
classic episode of Michael's classic Rampage.
But
Oh
it's
my God.
also filling in a slight blank that if they are in this multiverse of Halloween 2 not happening, the original Halloween 2, then
Well, it's like, how did they apprehend
Yeah,
Michael?
what happened to Michael
You
that
need-
leads
you
to him
need
being in
to-
that prison? And it was really cool to sort of see that. Now they have that Tom Jones Jr. comes in and plays the young or Dr.
He plays
Loomis,
Dr. Loomis, and audiences actually believed it was a computer generated effect.
I didn't even question it. I went, oh, they that looks so much like him. That must be a CG face put on a body
Right.
double, right?
And how unbelievable that it was a set construction worker, essentially.
Set designer, yeah.
Who didn't, if you look at Tom Jones Jr. and you Google him, he doesn't necessarily look like Donald Pleasance or Dr. Loomis, but when you do these subtle prosthetics to the shape of his existing
again,
face.
Chris Nelson, amazing
It
work,
might
subtly
be-
bringing him
It might be
to
Chris
life.
Nelson's most genius work, and Vincent Van Dyke, and I believe her name is Danielle Trinianazzi. That team,
Yeah.
the work, the subtle, brilliant work,
Mm-hmm.
that the way that effects team creates that Loomis makeup reminds me of like the work of Dick Smith. It's so detailed and brilliant.
Yeah, it works.
And subtle.
And the voice is the same guy that did the voice for the 2018
Oh, fascinating.
Halloween.
I did not
So it's
know
not
that.
Tom Jones Jr.'s voice. They just brought the same guy that you heard in the recordings.
But
right?
basically needing to do that flashback in order to create and reorient Michael's capture is really interesting.
It's that, and it's also, like you were talking about, is to give some more backstory to Hawkins, Deputy Hawkins, but it's also to give you now to set up Lonnie, the kid that from the original.
Right. Reinforces Lonnie, who
Right.
becomes a bigger character going forward.
Yep, and it's sort of like you get to see his experience with Michael in '78 and why that's going to carry on in obviously the last
I mean,
film.
I don't know what you guys listening think about that 78 flashback from Halloween Kills, but I think I might have said during the Haddonfield radio episodes, it might be my favorite thing about the entire trilogy, or from the whole trilogy.
It was done so well. It's so smart. So many Easter eggs.
And yet, I see so many people online that seem to really dislike that mask. Whereas I think that mask it might be my second favorite Michael mask of all time.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's great. I think you're never gonna have a mask that you can't tell the difference, right?
Look, I know that we have a lot of really, really professional level Michael Myers mask rehaulers listening. Could anyone in the comments section, if anyone out there can explain the discrepancies or what people didn't like about that 78 flashback mask, if you can devil's advocate, or maybe you don't like it and you know exactly why, or you have your own idea of what doesn't work, I would love to know the details as to what was distasteful to some people, because to my eye, I think it is magnificent.
It's great.
Magnificent.
Maybe it's a little too clean, just a little too stark white,
okay.
but just even knowing
I think
that.
one person said it has too much of a matte finish.
Yeah, to me,
I don't
the
know.
only thing that jumps out is like, oh, that's different. Is the tone of the white, but the sculpt, the feel, the look, like it doesn't pull me out at all. I'm totally nitpicking, but I love it. I love that whole sequence. The dog, you see the dog that we didn't see in the original one. The car, the station wagon from the asylum is parked on the street.
And it's like, this is how you do Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Organically placed Easter eggs that aren't distracting from the story.
And then you get like a double Easter egg of David Gordon Green planting Easter eggs in that flashback to be payoffs from things he's gonna do in Kills and Ends, with like the radio tower that he adds in the background.
That he brings a lot. He creates a lot of mystique around.
Right. See, I guess we can talk about a little bit. So we're getting into Kills now. Kills was made before the pandemic started, but the pandemic started towards the end of its production and really affected its release.
Well, the interesting thing to me about Kills, one of many interesting things, is Universal really used, and I'm going to use that word in semantics. That's the word I'm going to use. Used David Gordon Green's Halloween Kills really as a canary in the coal mine for this experiment that started to happen at the beginning of the COVID epidemic and pandemic outbreak, where suddenly there was all this media that had been paid for and produced. And all of a sudden,
for theaters,
there was nowhere to exhibit it.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of people that were going to lose hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars.
The question became, can you still make your studio movie that usually would come out in theaters, but now have it be presented in a streamable fashion, and can the studios still make money off of it?
And beyond that, is there now a brand new artery of investment that has to do with subscribers?
Sure. Yeah. So
in using a film that has this huge existing, almost half a century fan base as a magnet to draw in subscribers at this point in the entertainment industry's history, at the birth of the COVID epidemic, where suddenly all these executives had to scramble to quickly figure out a new way to exhibit all this material that they had produced.
Yep.
For television and for film.
So quick setup, obviously 2018 Halloween's a huge success.
$250 million in box office, $250 million in theaters.
They give David Gordon Green the green light to make a sequel, but it is still not a guarantee by the time that they are starting to make Kills that they are going to be able to make Ends. He writes the movie with a strong
almost like he's forcing their arm. Twisting their arm.
He knows he needs to be ready for a sequel.
Right.
But there's no guarantee yet, right? So they go into it with that idea, they make it, then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. It's supposed to come out in October of 2020. And then they push it a whole year before it comes out on, this is the beginning of the streaming thing. So Peacock was the first place you could
It was Universal,
see it.
Vivendi, and NBC's streaming platform.
Well, now Peacock's everywhere, right? Everyone's like, Peacock. But at the time, it was brand new. So this was a big deal. They knew that because of what a big hit they had with 2018's Halloween, that there'd be a lot of people who would want to see this. And they could use this to their advantage whatever way they're going to present it, right? So they wanted to maximize it. It's not about just making it streamable, but it's also about getting subscribers now for a channel that they're trying to launch. So they make it exclusive for about 60 days on Peacock. And they make an extended or like a director's cut version available as well, which I have a huge diatribe about, and I think is kind of really affects the third movie especially. But
the COVID pandemic was such a punch in the jaw to the David Gordon Green Halloween
It's so
trilogy.
sad. You really got to wonder what Kills would have done if it was just in the theaters.
Listen. I mean, we could do a whole episode on what I'm about to say, so I'm not going to really belabor it. But if COVID never happened and the trilogy ended, there was still going to end up being 3 films, and they were just done differently.
Yeah.
I think the stories would have been different.
Yeah, of course.
I think the screenplays would have been totally different. They might have had similar trajectories or elements or new addition characters.
Yeah.
But for example, like we'll get to when we talk more about ends, but the Corey Cunningham character is a perfect example. Yeah. I think if they had a different development cycle.
Well, they did. So.
Go ahead.
All right. So the pandemic, I think it just. I love David Gordon Green, but I think it gave him too much time.
That's a huge problem.
Too much time.
I agree.
Which is weird because you always hear filmmakers talking about how they weren't able to do the things that they want in a lot of films because they're not given enough time. But yet, in this case, here's somebody who was able to, the whole thing was able to hit pause. They had to figure out how they were going to put it out, and it was through that year off, or that year of waiting to put out Kills, that's when he sort of went back and put in the radio tower and the flashback, because to tie it into stuff he wanted to do with 3, because I think it was in that break that he decided to do that, like you always say, that big swing.
Right.
And change things up. Obviously, there's a whole different ending to Kills, where Laurie is on the phone with Michael, basically
after he kills her daughter.
After he kills her daughter,
and she basically says, "I'm coming to get you," and she gets up out of the hospital bed, and I'm going to get you. Yeah, and the movie would have ended with basically the cliffhanger, and then what? One more Halloween later?
No. So the setup is that it continues that night. That the third movie is still an extension of that same night.
But I'm talking
and
about
Laurie's going for Michael
gotcha.
now. She is going for him now. That sounds, it might sound a little far-fetched. 3 movies one night. I think I love it. Here's the thing. I wasn't a fan of
on the
ends.
other side of that.
I know. Listen,
I know. I totally respect where you're coming from.
I really wasn't a fan of ends. I watched it a lot. We did our episode. I kind of came around a bit. There's a lot I do like about it. But at the end of the day, when I know that in his heart, or his original intention, where he was going with this was somewhere somewhere else, and it was to continue this night. I think it's within the realm of horror movies, which is a extension of sort of fantasy, storytelling, that it's a very romantic idea that we would just sit in this one long ass Halloween night that does not end until Michael and Laurie
it's like a fan's dream. It's actually probably
that we've always wanted.
But
yes,
that's probably what a lot of the classic.
But he was ready to do it.
Wanted.
He was ready to do it. I think he second guessed himself, and I
say,
was bold.
Thank God he second guessed himself.
But
you cannot listen. A lot of people might hate me for saying this, all right? But as much as I love these characters, I love Laurie Strode, I love Michael Myers, there is not enough dynamic narrative potential between those two characters to cover 6 hours of storytelling. Or let's say 90-minute movie, so 4.5 hours. There's not enough.
Well,
it would have been anticlimactic, ultimately, I feel.
They had done such a good job of those first 2 movies. I don't see how they would have dropped the ball that hard. I think they sort of did when they.
I will say, I do agree. They short shriv, obviously, Laurie Strode through Kills, and then they sort of make her almost like a spectral, ghostly character in Ends. That's sort of getting a catharsis, of course, but she's sort of meandering through her own.
Well, she's decided to just lose her
which
trauma.
takes away her agency.
Exactly. It's not so.
So what I'm saying is, if Ends didn't have the extra narrative material that is about Corey and what is Andy Matichek's character's name? Do you remember? I can't remember.
Allison.
Corey and Allison. And them as a microcosmic idea of this infection that is plaguing Haddonfield that has gone on for 40 years within the reality of the films. If you didn't have that storytelling element, I don't know how what is ends? Just, what is it? Is it Laurie Strode sitting at her house waiting for Michael to ultimately get to her doorstep?
For me, it's
for
just
3 movies?
It's a simple, as an audience member, I watch Halloween 2018 very satisfied. I watch Halloween Kills. I am, it's not quite the same satisfaction, but I'm satisfied, and I loved seeing the way they made Michael a little more violent. It worked for what I like. But then 3, it just doesn't leave a satisfying feeling, or a feeling of like, I can take a thing I don't like about it and sit back and go, okay, I see what he was doing and how that makes sense and why that was a great choice. But if it still just doesn't leave me feeling that, then
it's almost like
that's how I go by.
I think by the end of Halloween Ends, ironically enough, even though Laurie Strode as a character obtains and confronts and transcends and receives a catharsis, ultimately, a lot of people in the audience did not.
No.
And were left unsatisfied. Narratively.
Yeah. I feel like I'm trying to force myself to like it.
I agree with that.
You know?
I'm not admonishing reality. I'm not suggesting I'm not seeing how maybe I would say as much as like 70% of the Halloween fans felt about Ends. I get it. And a lot of the points that I've seen made ad nauseum about what they're critical about, I actually understand those points objectively.
Well, he had an
I just think
job.
Like, what else would Ends have been if you didn't have this new storytelling avenue of Corey? What would Ends have been different than the first 2 films?
I feel like what probably happened is, like I just said, David Gordon Green had an impossible job of trying to wrap up this giant sort of franchise, right? And I think that he was set up to go, like I said, the way I think everyone expected it to probably go and wanted it to go. And then I think he just sort of probably realized no matter what I do there, the people are probably gonna not be satisfied or nitpick it. It's very hard to end something big, and there's always most people are not happy.
Look at
so
any
he probably said, I'm just gonna do what I want to do, and they can still not like it.
Look at any major story world ending, whether it's The Sopranos, whether it's name some things that have had endings.
Everything Lost.
People never like it.
Yeah,
that's all I'm trying to say. Nobody ever likes it, and you want to know why? I'll tell you why. Because it plays against a very basic psychological concept. Is that it's not really that a lot of people are reacting negatively to the ending of the story. They're reacting negatively to the fact that a story that they've been bathing in all this time is now not there anymore. Yeah. Now, yes, you can go back to the beginning of Lost and start season 1, episode 1 and move through the story again. But as we all know, there's nothing like that first time.
When you're moving
through.
It all out.
Everybody who's been blown away by Breaking Bad.
Oh, God.
And then has gone back to season 1, episode 1 a year later. I'm going to go back through it again. Yeah. Well, you still appreciate it and enjoy it, but it's never as good as that first time. So endings on a meta level for stories are not a pleasurable thing.
And in life, it's like somebody dying.
Exactly.
You just don't want things to end, and it's hard for anything's end to feel, I guess, natural or comfortable or...
and they throw the word ends right in the title.
It is. Yeah.
Think about that.
I think
I think it's important, so I want to give a minute to it.
He's got balls. I'll give him that.
Balls is the right word. You just said it. I was just basically going to say the same thing. Think about this for a second. And I want to give it a full minute of discussion because it's important. Words are important. When you look at Halloween Kills, that really does sum up that second film. Okay? It's if you want to see Michael Myers go ham, well, I would recommend Halloween Kills. Of all the 13 films, if somebody said, I just want to see Michael Myers go berserker, I'd say, watch Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
He is some great kills in that.
Yeah.
Kills.
Yeah.
Ends, that's a strong word. Imagine Star Wars ends. Yeah. Imagine anything with ends on the end. especially when fans have been, again, and I use this word specifically, but bathing, existing, ruminating within these complicated, dynamic story worlds. I always say this is really interesting. It never ceases to not be interesting to me. Going all the way back to the beginning of television, people, again, looking at words, they were called programs.
Right.
Television shows were called programs for a reason, because it's programming.
Right.
Okay, it's situational, societal programming. And that's why when, going back to the Breaking Bad analogy a minute ago, when Breaking Bad concluded, there are many reports and stats that showed there was this astronomical explosion of methamphetamine dealing in the United States. Because people were influenced by the events of Breaking Bad.
Yep.
They were influenced by the ideas, okay? Programs. Well, movies are just the same. If you spend 40 years watching the movies of a franchise, living some of your life within that reality, whatever it is, when somebody says this is now the end, I'm closing the window. Well, first I have to say, what right do you have to close the fucking door on my world?
Well, that's the thing. So how many of these...
And when do I ever use the F word on Haddonfield Radio? That's how serious I feel. No. What I'm saying is I mean it passionately, because as somebody who exists on a diet of stories in my life, as much as I exist on food or water, if somebody tells me I can't get any more of something, of a story world I love, well, that's a very dissonant psychological feeling.
How many of these movies in the past supposedly gave you the ending of Michael, but now this one, though, is telling you, like, this is. I mean, you can basically replace the word Halloween in these titles with just Michael Myers.
Absolutely.
Right. This is the story of. I mean, it's Laurie's story, but I mean, but the evil that is implied from the holiday that it is named after is all tied to that character of Michael.
Absolutely.
So you could basically just call these movies Michael Myers kills, and Michael Myers ends. You know what I mean? And it's hard because in the past, a lot of guys have ended him, but there was just more movies.
Well, you always knew, especially if you understood the behind-the-scenes world of the Halloween franchise, that you could literally you could kill Michael Myers, and 2 years later he could be back in a new movie that jumps off from the first movie again.
But you
can restart him.
This one's whole job was to end the franchise, to take the Jamie Lee Curtis storyline
to put that
a real ending,
mythology, and I'm saying mythology as something that exists above a story. Obviously, mythology is like obviously a whole different level. And the Laurie Strode, Michael Myers, convoluted Halloween Haddonfield mythology, I do think comes to a very conclusive ending. Now, if you don't want to say satisfying because you didn't feel satisfied by Halloween Ends, I totally understand that and respect that. But I still think it is a conclusive, logically conclusive ending to this first era of the Halloween franchise.
It is, because they break Mustafa Akkad's, one major rule. And so, of course, it's the ending. And, you're not supposed to destroy Michael. And they made a point to show you Michael being destroyed.
Yeah, there is nothing ambiguous about the destruction of this timeline's version of Michael Myers in Halloween Ends.
No. And I have to admit, like, as much as I would expect out of this trilogy to end with him dying, it's like I don't like seeing it that finite.
Yeah,
his body crushed and dismembered.
It's
there's
no wiggle room.
And there was supposed to be. There was, I think, a different ending even shot or thought of where he didn't go through the crusher. You know that he
listen though.
He knew he had to play things both ways.
David Gordon Green does something, though, that actually I said even in our Haddonfield Radio episode 13 about Halloween Ends, I mentioned this, I believe. What did leave a bad taste in my mouth is, even though you conclusively see Michael Myers killed and his body destroyed she keeps
The
the mask. It is one of the most bizarre storytelling decisions to my mind, of the whole franchise's history.
There's two things. There's just the very simple studio filmmaker, somebody saying you
gotta leave at least
one
a molecule.
breadcrumb.
Yeah.
One breadcrumb.
Yeah, I agree.
To say that there's some way to continue Michael, even if it's not Myers anymore, somebody in that mask can become a killer. However,
wouldn't you argue then that the opening of Halloween Ends basically gives that? It gives you the key to that.
It
the
does.
opening of Halloween Ends, that whole monologue, Laurie Strode tells the whole monologue of the corruption of Haddonfield, of what Michael's ultimate evil is the destruction of the fabric of the town.
Couldn't you see that mask sitting there also represents how Michael's trauma is so deep, it's never going away. Like, they got rid of him. It's not like Laurie is suddenly okay. And she still holds that trauma. That's why she's got that mask.
I'm thinking right now to myself, also maybe it could mean you don't erase the past to graduate it. You may be doomed to repeat it if you forget it. Yeah. There must be some emblematic totem that maybe is kept, that is there to simply... It's like she now controls that totem in her home, this happy home she's cathartically now graduated into, the cherry blossoms represent at the end between her and Hawkins. Yeah. And the mask is under Laurie's control now, and is now essentially like used as... I don't know how mythologically to explain it, but you know what I mean.
They know from the beginning of this trilogy the weight of this mask and the importance of this mask, and they make sure it stays there till the end. You know what I mean?
I still would have had her throw it into the machine chewer after it chewed up Michael. I just think I can, like I just did, I can come up with reasons that make it logical sense as to why Laurie would have kept it. Or even story sense. But it just never sat right with me, personally.
Right. Anyway, leading up to watching the trailer here for Halloween Kills, I want to point out that, I think that this trailer's job, at least, by the filmmakers, is really to explain how Michael is still here, which is interesting. I feel like you could save that for the movie. I think people in horror movies always understand the killers can kind of come back, but I feel like they're either worried that people are like, wait, wasn't he dead? And they really try to show you how he gets out, or they are just trying to give you an awesome chunk from this great scene with him and the firefighters. And so
it is really one of the showstopper scenes of Halloween Kills.
It's amazing visually.
And the
so
fire
good.
gives it this almost like a mythic element. Yeah. You know what I mean? And mythic kind of feel to it.
I think they're trying to say, look, we're going to step up the kills for this one. It's going to be fun. You're going to want to see it. And I think by them sort of lingering on that idea, they don't have to give away too much else of their movie.
And as I was prepping for this, one of the other things about that firefighter sequence that I think is really, really cool is it sets up this notion within this timeline that Michael Myers really physically almost can't be stopped.
Yeah.
So what I think it is to do is it's to set in motion that logic. So later and ends when you see the townspeople give him that beating, and he eventually gets up and it's directed and shot very impressionistically. Yeah. I think because of that reason, it's supposed to give you this knowledge that Michael is somehow able to not feel pain or something to that effect. I even think I read once David Gordon Green saying in his trilogy, the reason why Michael can exist through such traumatic damage is because he doesn't feel physical pain.
Yeah, he's getting hurt. He just doesn't
he's getting
feel
injured, but he just doesn't.
That's why he knows to wrap up a wound and all that. But
anyway, go ahead.
So also I think it's interesting that this is the only one of the 3 movies that they did do teaser for. And even like a teaser that was all based on just seeing them film the movie,
right?
Because
like an announcement.
Yeah, because they were in the heart of COVIDness during all of this. I think that they had a big kind of 2-year gap, and they had such a hit from the first one. They just really needed to try to let people know we're making something. But again,
exactly.
This movie, is in the heart of, comes out in the middle of sort of the reformatting of how movies are introduced to the world now with streaming, and since the pandemic really hit,
When we come back from watching this trailer, and before we jump into the Halloween Ends trailer, Joe and I will talk a little bit about our experiences, actually how we both took in Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends when they first premiered. So for right now, let's jump into the trailer, right?
Yeah, you
for
guys
Halloween
can look up the
Kills.
teasers and stuff if you want. They're
Yeah.
out there on YouTube.
We're just going to do the 3 official trailers.
Yeah, this is the official main trailer for Halloween Kills that was originally put out for the movie, and like I said, I think its main job is really to get you to understand
that there is going to be a continuation to this story.
Yeah, it's
regardless
we're getting
of what's
Michael
going on
out
in
of
the
it.
real world and in their world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, here we
All
go.
right, here we go.
My grandmother was right. The boogeyman was real.
It's over.
We can't hurt anyone ever again.
No one told you.
Told me what?
Somebody in there?
Michael Myers is alive.
Stop! You had a knife in your stomach.
You and Allison should not have to keep running. Evil dies tonight.
I'm not just gonna sit and watch another innocent person die.
If you track Michael's victims, that's a straight line to Michael's childhood home.
What do? We fight.
Let's hunt him down.
Michael Myers is flesh and blood. But a man couldn't have survived that fire. The more he kills, the more he transcends.
Run! Go home now!
He's the essence of evil.
Do it! Do it! You want your mask? Come and get it!
I'm coming for you, Michael.
Okay, Halloween Kills.
Now, 2 things.
Yeah.
The first half of that trailer, I love that slow, stylish, sort of greatest hits of that firefighter sequence.
Yes.
And it's the fire and the color, and I just think it's so effective. It really gets your blood pumping for the movie.
I can't help but, in one of David Gordon Green's commentaries, he says one of his inspirations of that scene was the old the Dracula movie, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
Oh, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Right, when he did it, and it was Gary Oldman.
Yep.
Right, and there's all that very silhouette battle sequences.
Oh yeah, that was done in a very old school cinematic style. Like
and you can see that
silent film
that
style.
effect that David Gordon Green took from that and sort of applied where so much of it is with not true like black silhouettes, but so much of it is just stark darkness against the fire.
I
It's
mean,
great.
Michael with those heavy steps coming out of Laurie's burning house onto the front porch is about as mythic and as iconic
like she
an
says,
image as you get.
Like a man who would escape that fire is only getting stronger.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I love that they use that awesome subjective shot where the firefighters, you're behind the firefighter's mask when the axe hits.
Yeah.
It's just, what a sequence. It's just great. It really makes me realize how just fundamentally awesome the openings of really all three of David Gordon Green's Halloween films are. Say what you will about Kills or Ends.
Yeah.
All three of the films have really fantastic openings.
Yep.
And in Ends, you get the whole sequence with Corey going to babysit, which ties back to the 78 and babysitting.
I
with
do
this
remember
little maniacal little wolf boy.
I love that. Before, I'd seen the rest of the movie, initially I'm watching that opening to Ends going, this is a great opening.
And it's like you
I have
don't know
no
where
idea
it's going.
what's going on, but it was so like, oof, when that kid fell.
And even when he fell, you're like, what? Where is this story going?
When the kid locks Corey up in the attic or upstairs, I just kept waiting for Michael to pop out.
I kept thinking Michael's upstairs.
I'm like, oh, that's what's happening.
That's what it is.
Yep, exactly. And the kid's doing it. Like, Michael's going to get you.
When I was first watching Halloween Ends, the first night it was on Peacock, I remember thinking during that scene, oh my God, I think I know what they're going to do. They're going to show Michael killing a kid.
Oh.
I thought that's was going to be the scary, taboo, horrifying
No, they never really went there.
Didn't go there.
Yeah.
But still, what an opening of Halloween Ends. And then crashing into the music with the Halloween 3 font, the blue font.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just
David
so good.
Gordon Green also talks about how he is a big fan of Halloween 3. But you'll also notice at the end of the Halloween Kills trailer that we just watched, that it still had the dialogue and a little bit of footage from that original ending I talked about, where you hear Laurie saying, I'm coming to get you, Michael, and then it shows her leaving the hospital with the knife in her hand.
I said to Joe when we were watching the trailer, it really does get you blood pumping when she says
That's what I
that.
mean. It sets you up.
It does make you kind of crave
I think it would have
that.
worked to stay in that one night, personally.
I hear ya.
But anyway.
Isn't it interesting, I was going to say a few moments ago, that right now here we are, we're recording this in June of 2024 for our listeners in the past and future, and I will say that right now there is a very interesting film experiment where they, The Strangers, that film?
Yep.
Well, director Rennie Harlin, who made Nightmare on Elm Street 4, he actually has now made this Strangers trilogy. The first part just came out, and it is 3 films that take place over the course of one night. It's like The Strangers, but stretched into 3 films. Now, I'm curious to see how they're going to maintain the story for 3 films. I don't quite see what the story is that's going to, again, last, 4.5 to 6 hours. But I'm curious to see how he'll do it. And he's certainly working within that mold that you were just describing that this trilogy could have been.
I have to imagine that there's a whole script out there for a third David Gordon Green movie that has nothing to do with Corey.
That's so
the
interesting.
Continuation of this,
If anybody out there listening knows anything about something like that, if anything exists about an alternate Halloween Ends that didn't include the Corey Cunningham subplot, or I guess main plot, let us know what that is in the comments section. I'm very curious.
So, was this trailer effective in getting you to go to see it?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I watched Halloween Kills the day it became available. Actually, literally, I watched it actually on Thursday night at midnight. Or not you know what I mean? Midnight, Thursday going into Friday at midnight. The second it was available, Halloween Kills on Peacock, I just fired it up and started watching it. And I actually think I texted Joe like at 9 o'clock the next morning. And he said, I'm going to be watching it. But so I watched it, and I loved Halloween Kills the first time I watched it.
Oh, I was sucked right in. I just kept going like, oh my God, this trilogy, I was so excited for a third.
Now, I felt there were some sour notes. The evil dies tonight.
Yes.
Evil dies
tonight. That is my criticism. It's a little heavy-handed in its message.
A lot of the hospital chaos, I thought, was a little heavy-handed in the way it was. It could have been portrayed. The same script could have been just if it had been portrayed or directed a little differently. I think I would have liked it a little more. I like some of those ideas of chaos and Michael, not only being involved. Michael's violence isn't just about killing people, it's about creating trauma and chaos. And so I like those elements in the film. I just don't think they're directed and handled as well as they could have been. But I still think a lot of the thematic ideas in Halloween Kills, when he attacks the couple with the drone.
Oh God, yeah.
Horrific.
Yeah.
Horrific.
Yeah. I honestly, I can't believe I'm blanking, and I think I looked it up, but I'm confused at the moment. Was this one released in the theaters at all?
I believe it did have some theatrical exhibition. I just don't think very much.
I mean, it still did
could
okay.
be wrong. Oh no, it did. It did because it had a pretty good opening weekend. I'm looking right here.
Well, but they'll even give. I think it counts, even though it's during the pandemic. Somehow they count the streaming, but it still did pretty darn well for a horror movie, even though it didn't have the numbers of the first one. But it's almost unfair with the pandemic to apply.
I knew there was blood in the water for Halloween Kills, even outside of the pandemic's influence, because I remember walking my dog Wally right when the Hollywood Reporter review broke, when the review embargo broke on Halloween Kills. Now, through some social media channels and through some screenings, I had heard that people didn't like it. But when that Hollywood Reporter, they bashed the movie so hard that I said, oh no.
Oh God.
Oh my God. Now, did I feel negatively about I had a blast watching Halloween Kills.
I really liked it.
And I genuinely loved Halloween Ends when I watched it again, the midnight it appeared on Peacock. That's how I saw it in my bedroom, and I adored it.
Now you want my fan theory on how we can continue to tie Halloween 3 into the main universe here?
Do it.
Okay, so I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a meme that goes around of showing Michael from the 78 movie when he's a kid in the clown costume. And he's got his original clown mask, and the joke or something about the meme is just basically saying that wouldn't it be crazy if that mask was an early Silver Shamrock mask, right? That ends up
the clown mask that Michael's wearing when he's 6.
Right. So that's influenced by the Cochran thing. You know what I mean?
From Halloween
the same
3.
way those other masks are as well, and then so. If you want to fast forward to this stuff, you can almost say, because Michael actually once he gets his mask back in this, and later it's almost like he seeks out those three kids,
right,
with the 3 masks, the 3 original Silver Shamrock masks.
It was the witch, the pumpkin, and the skull.
Oh, I love that idea. I wish they could somehow tie in the original clown thing to it, but that's a stretch a little bit. I just had fun thinking about it.
But even though, it brings up a good point though, even though I think the inclusion of those Halloween 3 masks within the David Gordon Green trilogy was intended to be a kind of colorful little homage. Yeah. Well, we always talk about, even if you intend it that way as a filmmaker, when you enter this stuff into the reality of the films, you alter the reality that those characters are living within. Now you have brought reality that those masks exist within that timeline.
Yeah.
And so you can start to tie those things together fundamentally because those items exist within that reality. Mm-hmm. So there you go. So hey, why not?
Anyway,
why don't we jump in? Why don't we watch the Halloween Ends trailer?
We've talked a lot about it already.
This is our first 13-hour episode.
Oh my God. I just love these movies so much.
Yeah, there's so much there is. And even the funny thing is, even when we wrap this all up and we're done and stop recording, I always say, geez, there was 5 other things I forgot to mention. There's so much we could mention about this, guys. And if there's stuff that we miss or we don't get to and you want to talk about it, put it in the comment section. Make a conversation starter there. Get a thread going. That's our favorite thing in the world. Or if you want, go over to Instagram, search Haddonfield Radio or hashtag Haddonfield Radio. You'll find our Instagram page. We have all sorts of really fun horror-oriented material there. Jump in on some of those threads as well. But anyway.
Okay, here we go. Halloween Ends trailer. The official trailer begins now.
get me, motherfucker.
Okay, and we're back.
Wow. First of all, as we're watching that, as it got about 50% through the trailer, I started to think, I don't think this trailer is going to mention Corey as a character at all.
Well, think about it. Think about how jarring in a way it was just to get that in the actual movie. You couldn't
Like,
just
how do you sell that?
How do you sell that?
Two films into a story.
If you were to make a trailer really based on everything we see of Corey, it would make no sense. You wouldn't have any idea where it's coming from.
No, you're absolutely right.
And they kind of had to use what they knew people would expect, which would be the big face-off.
I mean, this trailer actually is very controversial in the lore of the Halloween franchise in its entirety.
Big old
because
bait and switch.
This trailer is really considered the false promise trailer.
Yeah.
Where people were sold a bill of goods that a lot of people felt they did not live up to.
Right.
And the trailer does, in all fairness, objectively, it in no uncertain terms, it is promising you the final confrontation between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers.
I mean, that's a given. We're gonna get that. That's
It
what
even
this is all leading to, we would hope.
Right. And so, yes, I get that. And Joe was saying there is a second trailer that delves into some of this new material.
You just see him, but you don't. It doesn't necessarily.
You don't know the
present
context
itself as like a story that's more focused on him at all than anything else. And I think it is important to point out that you'll notice on the trailers for this that they do go out of their way now to tell you that this is going to be in cinemas. You know, by the time this comes out in October 2022. I believe that
it was in enough theaters to have a $40 million opening.
And again, that's still not bad numbers. I know it's not the $80 million from the first one, but their budgets are, what were they? They were probably like $20 million or $13 million or something.
All three of these films were made with exceptionally frugal budgets.
Yeah.
They were made by Blumhouse.
Yeah.
So their entire filmmaking formula has to do with...
Oh, I got it right here. The first one's $10 million. The second movie was $20 million. The third one was $30 million.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
And I think every dollar of that is on the screen.
Yeah.
It's not. Those aren't expensive films, especially for a major studio like Universal or even a major mini studio like Blumhouse. That's a very frugal budget, especially when you spend $10 million on Halloween 2018 and you make $250 million.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that's poured back into the next two films.
And they know they're going to keep making money off that first one. It's a hit. It's a good movie.
These movies are going to go on to be moneymakers forever.
It almost doesn't matter what the other two are going to do in a way.
Fans can say what they will ultimately about the films on a film-by-film level or as a trilogy in terms of their artistry, we'll say. But in terms of a pragmatic, practical assessment, there should not be a fan out there of this franchise that cannot admit that what these films did well was explode Michael Myers into his biggest audience ever.
Oh, God, yeah.
David Gordon Green and his team, and Jason Blum, and to a lesser extent, John Carpenter at this point in the 2018 period.
Everyone's standing on his shoulders to a degree, you have to acknowledge.
Truly did succeed and create a product, and I hate to call an artistic expression of a movie a product, but that is also what it is, a commercial product that was extremely successful.
Yeah, I think any movie coming out of one of the major studios like this, it's a product.
Yeah.
It's not just a piece of art, unfortunately.
Right.
There's just too many politics and studio heads and everything else involved that, it's the unfortunate part of the film process.
2024, in a movie like In a Violent Nature, Chris Nash's movie comes out that truly is an art house slasher film.
Yeah.
So the legacy of Halloween Ends may well have not been written yet, okay? And the legacy of David Gordon Green's trilogy, in the long game, it certainly has not been written yet.
Yeah.
And I would argue that a film like In a Violent Nature the balls that a film like that has to make an arty slasher film is drawing on that same energy that powers Halloween Ends. Halloween Ends is an arty slasher film. That's what it is. It is the most David Gordon Green of all three of those films.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think at the end of the day, you hear Spielberg, Lucas, even Hitchcock. When I was doing research about him recently, all the greats all talk about sort of they have like a little disdain a little bit for the audience, because they know they can never truly satisfy them when you're doing a multi-story, a long game. You're playing the long game. They know when you get to the end, right? And I think David Gordon Green understood that, and at the end of the day, he decided to do what he wanted to do, which makes it much more of an art house film, much more like him. I just don't know if that was for good or for bad. It's hard to say.
I just think the thing is, within those three films, you get something for everyone.
The problem is the pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
There's that element added to unfortunately the process of the last two films.
It just totally changed the trajectory of these films.
You just can't talk about the films with the same opinions, or unfortunately, there's a big question mark. What would have happened if the pandemic didn't hit?
Yeah.
What would these movies have become?
I mean, just like Joe and I could talk about these three films for another 2 hours, people are going to be debating, fans, film lovers, horror fans are going to be debating David Gordon Green and his team's Halloween trilogy, his 2018 timeline. They will be debating that 40 years from now.
It's curious, as the Halloween franchise continues, will anybody else decide to dive back into the Corey,
Well,
story
we talked about
pool,
the comic book angle in the Halloween franchise history. Another thing that could really explode within the pages of comics would be Corey, and building out Corey's story a little bit.
You just have you have such a finite amount of time where you get the Corey that we got in that movie,
right?
Because he dies at
it
starts and ends all within that.
Which I just want to say, because
I
I lost my train of thought earlier, that was the other major thing about Halloween Ends that really left a bad taste in my mouth, was killing definitively therein, killing Corey Cunningham.
Yeah.
I think that was a huge mistake.
Yeah.
That character could have been used in other ways going forward, or at least, even if you never go back to that character, leave it open for the fans to speculate.
But it was satisfying to know that Michael, at the end of the day, didn't take his shit.
Yeah.
Yep. That Michael, because he was so overcome by Corey so much earlier in the movie. You know what I mean?
And I
Corey
think that's
came off as more powerful so many more other times.
I think that's one of those elements of Halloween Ends that really, really left a bad taste in some fans' mouth.
Yeah.
That Corey could just literally knock, even he was in a obviously categorically weakened
years
state.
Later here, right?
He's in a highly injured state, and he's old.
Yeah.
But that you can affect Michael Myers and knock him down and steal his mask and make him look like a chump. But I could go on, but there's ways of making arguments of why I do think it makes sense. But we'll talk about that in the future. We have so much more time on the Haddonfield radio airwaves going in the future into the future where we can talk about these films, and we will. But as far as the trailers are concerned, we've now covered all of the trailers for all of the Halloween films and all of the Halloween films.
Yeah.
So I feel kind of a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Joe, why don't you tell everybody what's coming up next in our next episode 12 of Trailer Park?
Well, that is going to be our coverage of the Poltergeist franchise. And I want to thank our one of our original listeners, Spooky Halloween Gal, for suggesting it and asking us to do it.
I mean, we say all the time, if you guys have suggestions for films or franchises or things you want us to cover, we literally will consider it. Well, this is proof.
Yeah. It just seemed like a perfect example of some killer movies that I remember from my youth. I had some great love for, and
you have a couple really good ones, a couple not so much,
Well,
and so you run the gamut. And you know what else is interesting is we've never really covered any like supernatural horror here.
No.
So that's kind of
no.
fun.
And we're gonna have to bring up you have a strong supernatural
Oh,
background.
God, I'll
you
tell
brought
you a
up
lot of stories.
briefly earlier with you did a PBS series, Haunted RI.
Yeah, I got a lot of
And,
good stuff I can bring, paranormal stuff I can bring to the table for that episode. But if you listen to our Psycho franchise breakdown, Haddonfield Radio Goes Psycho, that's kind of what you can expect for this Poltergeist episode.
Let's put it this way. This is going to be our last episode of this season of Trailer Park. So we're going big. And, we are going to transition into a different second series for our channel.
That will complement Haddonfield
It'll
Radio.
sort of take the place of Trailer Park for a while. Does not mean that we won't do more Trailer Parks down the line. There's only so much time for us to get together and make episodes.
Yep.
And so we can really realistically pull off 2 series. So we're keeping our
and what he
Haddonfield Radio
means, just
series.
to clarify, is every month by our schedule, you get 2 episodes essentially of our content.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, you get a Haddonfield Radio episode, and you get what was always a Trailer Park episode.
Yep.
Well, there's a new series we're going to be talking about more in more detail as we go forward. That's going to be replacing Trailer Park that I think you guys are going to hopefully will really enjoy.
That'll come at the end of the next episode. After we're done talking about the Poltergeist stuff, at the end of that last episode 12, we'll sort of
in more
unveil
details
the new series
will
for
come
you.
about that. I promise you guys are going to love it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
So episode 12 will be doing the Poltergeist films. You get Poltergeist from 1982. You get Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, one of the most frightening films to this day
that movie messed
I have
me
ever
up.
seen.
Messed me up.
God is in his holy temple.
Julian Beck.
Julian Beck, who has a
living
Doors
fan.
connection.
I hope I
So
get
we'll
to talk about my
that.
connection. All right, there we go.
So we got all sorts of fun stuff. We got Poltergeist 3, which I think sucks. And then the recent Gil Keenan directed Poltergeist reboot with Sam Rockwell, which I would say is Metza. Has some good, some not so good. But I promise you, our coverage in our episode hopefully will be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And so we'll cover all those films and talk about the cursed history of all those films as well. The real life.
There's some sad stories.
Oh my
involved
God!
there.
There's so much to talk about, and a lot of personal anecdotes from Joe and myself.
Some legendary, historic, groundbreaking visual effects to bring up.
Questions of who directed the movie Poltergeist. There's a lot connections to Tobe Hooper, of course, who kind of launched the whole. There's so many cool things to talk about. But the Reverend Kane, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In my mind,
Yeah.
maybe next to Pennywise, the scariest character in the history of film.
I already have anxiety knowing I have to rewatch those movies this week coming up, and I just don't like that.
Or
dude.
in the sequel, when Craig T. Nelson vomits up the tequila worm and it becomes this animatronic Reverend Kane, that I've got to remember to look it up because I feel it looked like it was almost like a Rob Bottin animatronic. I got to look that up.
And I'm going to present. I have a unique perspective of a few years ago when that remake came out.
Yeah.
I sat down with my kids who were in their late teens and one was in their early 20s, and we watched the remake, and then I put on the original. Because I was like, let me show you, how scary the original really is and all this stuff. And let me just say, it was very interesting to hear.
Let me guess, they were scared by the remake or loved the remake and didn't like the original.
They couldn't stop laughing through the original.
Wow.
The effects took them out of it so much that, anyway, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so much.
But anyway, we are also going to be coming up soon with our next episode of the main series, Haddonfield Radio.
Yeah, episode 21.
And it's we're going to do the remake.
The Platinum Dunes 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, remake, reimagining, requel, whatever you want to call it.
And then there'll be one more after that with Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, exactly. That our season 2 finale of Haddonfield Radio, episode 22, will be, of course, Freddy versus Jason. And real quick, we are aware that chronologically we flipped those 2 films. Well, we've done that for a reason that will become more clear as we continue onward with Haddonfield Radio and start talking about season 3. So anyway, anything else?
No, that's it.
I had a blast talking about the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy. I like I said, we could have gone on and on. We had to kind of cut ourselves off here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and we've enjoyed being here down in Joe's basement with all you guys.
Yeah.
And we'll be back here next time with the Poltergeist retrospective episode. A lot of fun, a lot to look forward to.
It's like we're getting back to the core of Haddonfield Radio when you talk about Halloween. You know, it's why we started all this. It's fun talking about these. This was great.
Yeah,
Thank
this is
you
a
guys.
blast. Anytime we can revisit this franchise, Joe and I jump on that opportunity. So it's doing this whole season, I just want to say, covering all these Halloween films has been an absolute blast. Talking to all you guys, learning from a lot of you guys has been a blast. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be back next time with episode 12. And we've got so much coming down the road. So just stick with us. We're just getting started.
You can't shut us up.
No, we're just getting going. So anyway, anything else?
That's it. That's all I got.
I just want to say how much I love my mom and my little chihuahua Wally. And my cat Kitty. And my 2 fish, red and blue. I'll just throw them all. And I really want to
Whoa.
I have to say something important.
Oh, boy.
I want to say hello to my niece Frankie.
Oh.
Now, my niece Frankie is actually a YouTuber.
Oh.
Next episode, I'll find out, and I'll give her the plug.
Yeah, okay.
She's got subscribers and everything. She's 7 and she's a YouTuber.
Okay.
And she's
Sign me up.
smart as a whip.
Is that
creative as all get out.
I take that back.
And I just want to say hello because she's fascinated by the fact that we also have a YouTube channel.
Okay. Don't let her listen to
we're
these.
also YouTubers. So hello Frankie, and hi Mom, and hi everyone else, and hi Al and everyone.
So you picked this
Dad.
episode to drop the F-bomb in.
Yeah, the one episode I dropped,
right.
maybe the 2 episodes,
All
the second
right.
time I dropped the F-bomb. I was feeling passionate.
Wow, what's wrong with you?
Anyway, we love you guys. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us. Until then, I'm Christian White.
I'm Joe Francazio.
And have a very happy Halloween.